I will tell you a story now that it's all over, and I think it's an interesting story because I think it does show what you buy when you buy influence, when you pay money for people like me. Here's how it works. George Soros recently moved, was it 12 or 14 billion dollars into the Soros Foundation, and that $14 billion joins a previous 12 or something like that. It was something like 25, 26 billion dollars that one person, that's not Zuckerberg and it's not Bezos and it's not Hollywood, it's none of them. It's just one guy has put $25,000 million into various social change activities. Hollywood makes movies that tell people how to vote, comedy, music, put all that aside. Let's just look at George Soros. So George Soros puts $25 billion into these cultural things. And a Republican would ask, well, what is his return on investment? And up until now, I would have said, well, it's a blue map, but that doesn't make any sense to conservatives. But this probably will. What does George Soros get for his $25 billion? Well, property taxes in Illinois are now 3 or 4 times what they were before. And people are selling their houses because they can't pay the property taxes, and they're selling them for half of what they're worth or a third. So there's an enormous flood of money coming into the socialists in the state government of Illinois because property taxes have tripled or quadrupled in the last 10 years. That's an enormous source of money. Huge. And they plan to do the same thing everywhere. So where's Soros's money come into this? Well, here's how it works. Among the many things, 125, 130 things that George Soros puts money into, is an organization called Media Matters. And Media Matters is founded by a guy who's certifiably insane. I mean, I'm not just my opinion. I mean, the guy's been like hauled away in a straitjacket kind of thing. And Media Matters' job is to hire people to look at what every single conservative commentator says and then find a way to skewer that person, to destroy them if they can, using their own words. So there's probably 5,000 hours, more or less, of me speaking just openly about what I think. There's probably 5,000 hours of me speaking my mind on the internet. And Media Matters was paid by Soros to have people go through pretty much everything I've said. And they got a hold of this interview I did with Stefan Molyneux where we were discussing the bell curve. And we were discussing a book, and we were discussing the premises in the book. And while we were discussing the premises in the book, I stated some of the premises in the book, and then those direct quotes were used as if it was my opinion. So what does that have to do with billions and billions of dollars in property taxes that the government and big state gets? Well, here's how it works. 3-4 months ago, in Florida, I met a person I like very, very much. He's a conservative soldier. He's one of the best people I ever met. He's an enormously big-hearted guy. And I admire him enormously. And he asked me, we weren't very good friends at the time, he said, hey, I did a significant amount of work to get the current governor of Illinois, Rautner, elected because he was a conservative, and he came over to my house and he talked about all the conservative things he was going to do. So I went to a lot of trouble, spent a lot of money to get him elected. We got him elected. We got a Republican elected in Illinois. And once he got into office, he started to sign legislation that was worse than the most progressive Democrats that we've seen. And he kept doing it. He turned Illinois into sanctuary state, and he let those property taxes continue to rise, and kept signing those bills. He signed public funding for abortion up until, birth bills, these kind of things. And he said, I've had enough of it. You're not the person you said you were, and I'm going to support a challenger. So he contacted me, and he asked me if I would be willing to come out to Illinois and support this challenger named Jeanne Ives. And this challenger, I'm told, was a real fighter, real heroic. She had gone to West Point. She had 4 kids in the military, was married to a military guy. She turned down, pensions that she was entitled to as a state legislator because the state didn't have any money and so on. I said, that's it, man. That's exactly the kind of person that I want to be associated with. I'm in. I'm happy to do it. And without having ever met this person, I put my name and my reputation and my face on promotional material for Jeanne Ives. 3 weeks before a fundraiser was going to be held in Illinois that I was not just the featured speaker on, I was the guy. And I used my name and influence to try and get as many people out to this fundraiser as possible. So we fly out, Natasha and I fly out to Illinois the day before the event, and then the day of the event we get to the venue about an hour and a half before it's supposed to start. And about 45 minutes before the event, the person who invited me gets a text, and he texts back, and he gets another text, and he gets up and walks away for a while. Okay. And he's gone for quite a while, 20 minutes, something like that. And he comes back to the table, and here's what he says. He says, I've just been talking to the Ives campaign, and they tell me that they cannot come to this fundraiser if you're going to be there. What's that? They said that Jeanne cannot come to this event if you're going to be there. I'm just completely mystified. And then they elaborate and say that somebody had sent the Ives campaign a Media Matters article on me that was done maybe a year earlier, a little less than a year earlier, where they called me an academic racist and a white supremacist based on an interview I did with Stefan Molyneux, where we were talking about the bell curve. And of the 5,000 hours of times me talking about anything on the internet has been out there, they were able to find some quotes from one interview that I did with another guy who did most of the talking. And they put these quotes together in such a way that it made me sound like a white supremacist and a racist. So I said, look, can I just talk to somebody here? I can just show you videos that I do with black conservatives, with friends and people. It's obvious how much I respect them and so on. But she wouldn't meet with me because that would be, terrible, obviously. And I met with two of her campaign people. We were in a small room, and I sat down and I started to pull out my defense here. And they said, these two guys said, look, Bill, we know you're not a racist, but did you say that black people are unemployed and unemployable? I said that the dependency strategy of absolutely destroying inner cities, making people dependent on the government, means that they end up unemployed and unemployable. But I said it made them unemployed and unemployable because of a policy that's been put on them from above. I didn't say that they were naturally unemployed or unemployable, but I did say that. They said, did you say that black people are lazy? I said, what I said was that black people have become dependent on the government. Dependency makes you lazy, and that's not what they quoted me as saying, because it's not even just dependency makes you lazy that I said. When I went back and looked at the actual transcript, what I said was, dependency makes you lazy, comma, and I ought to know because I was dependent on my friends for many years on their largesse, and I was lazy, bitter, angry, and miserable. In other words, my so-called supremacist position that this race is lazy, in the same sentence, I said that and I understand this phenomenon because it happened to me over the space of 10 years. That's what they did. So, in any event, I'm talking to these two guys, and like I said, they said, we know you're not a racist. I said, look, guys, I'm just here to help the candidate, okay? I don't care. I'm here for this guy, who's a wonderful guy. I'll do anything for him. So I'll sit this one out, no problem. I'll just sit down in the golf simulator room at this golf course and start smacking golf balls at a video screen for a while. And they said, okay, we'll just pretend it didn't happen. Fine. Okay, fine. So I go down to there. The fundraiser goes on. So a lot of people ask where I am. Some people get up and leave when they find out I'm not there, but they do the fundraising. They raise some money. And as we're walking out to the car, a guy who helped me with this suddenly started cursing, and I said, "What?" He said he was looking at the Jeanne Ives campaign Facebook page, and prior to meeting with me, the Ives campaign said, "We utterly denounce the racist comments made by Bill Whittle. We've taken down all of the promotional materials that he's done for us. We had no idea that he held these inexcusable views. And we not only do not have anything to do with him, he was not at the fundraiser. Jeanne Ives has severed all ties with this horrible white supremacist." And that really hurt and pissed me off quite a bit. The next day I wake up, thank God for Natasha, because I don't know what I would have done without her, but the next day I wake up, and that same social media guy named Josh Firestein, who came to my rescue and for whom I'm extremely grateful, was defending me left and right. He said, "How you feeling?" I said, "I'm marginally better than yesterday." He says, "Well, you might want to sit down." I said, "Okay." And he hands me his phone where he's done screen grabs. And the Charlotte Observer and the Chicago Tribune and the Los Angeles Times and all of these screen grabs that say GOP challenger cancels event with white supremacist Bill Whittle. And when I saw those things, you get anybody, I don't know if you've ever had that kind of shock where you feel, it's like metallic taste in your mouth. Something happens to your nervous system. It's not just like a shock. It's like a sensation. And I've used this expression 100 times, and so are you, but I never meant it because I never really understood it. But the truth is, I wanted to crawl under a rock and die. I just wanted to go crawl under a rock. I wanted to go away, a long way away, and never be seen again. I didn't want to fight about it, didn't want to argue about it. It's in 60 newspapers. AP picked it up, I already have enough trouble with these college students, and now it's news. Now it's in the newspaper, so it's got to be true. And it took me probably 3 or 4 hours before I had the even emotional strength to look at some of the things that I'd said about this. And as I started reading some of my quotes and things from transcripts from Stratosphere Lounge and so on, I actually felt this enormous sigh of relief, because if you have a conscience, you say to yourself, have I become this? Is this what I am? Have I become a racist because of all this stuff that's going on? And then I started reading about all the times I said things like, the Tuskegee Institute, and I started talking about all the times I said that this proves that if you hold people to higher standards, they'll rise to higher standards. And I've said 50 times in public that that I think Booker T. Washington's one of the 3 greatest Americans that ever lived, and so on and so on and so on. And I come back to L.A. 2 days after I get back. I was scheduled to have a panel discussion at Cal Poly, but the Democratic Student Society and the Muslim Student Society both pulled out of that because I was going to be there, and they tried to scramble to get me on with somebody else. But I said, I'm not going to come to this event after people have basically said, no, we're pulling out because of this. I'm not going to come begging back here and argue with these people. It's not going to be about the media anymore. It's all going to be about me. It's going to be me defending myself against 4 other people on a panel, an entire hostile group of people who don't listen and never have. So that cost me a significant amount of money. A couple of other events cost me a significant amount of money, and a couple of events started saying, we don't know if we can go through with this and continue to have you come and be the host of this event or whatever. Shortly after this, I went to an event in Tucson, and the event went very well. And after it was over, I went up to the organizer of the event and I said, I want to thank you for sticking with me, That really means a lot to me, especially right now. And he said, look, Bill, we'd all heard about it and we'd all gotten emails about it, and there was some concern about it. There was a little froth going on. But 3 or 4 of the organizers of the event and I sat down and we looked at the Stefan Molyneux interview that they referenced, and we could tell in 3 minutes that this was a fake news story, that there was nothing to it. We could tell within 5 minutes that there's there's nothing racist at all about what you were saying. So, well, I thanked him for going to the trouble of doing that. So here's my point. Jeanne Ives lost the primary by 2 percentage points. And I suspect that if I'd been doing the messaging that I thought I was going to be doing, as well as the social media magic that this other guy, Josh, was capable of pulling off, I think there's a very good chance that we could have won that election. Because I had some really, really different out-of-the-box ideas. And this seemed like the right candidate. So when people say, well, where's my return on investment? The answer is this. George Soros puts $22 billion or $26 billion on the table. Part of that money goes to Media Matters. Media Matters smears me. The conservative challenger in Illinois distances me, which is what made it a news story, by the way. It wasn't a news story that Media Matters put this thing out. Media Matters is Media Matters. But when the Republican conservative challenger calls me a white supremacist and distances themselves from me publicly, denounces me, that's news. So, George Soros put down money that took me out of this fight and some other capable people out of this fight, that since it was a 2-point loss, I believe we could have won. And if we'd had another 6 months to convince the rest of people in Illinois, we could have won the general too, I think. So for his $22 billion, one of the many things that George Soros gets, including the Congress and the House of Representatives are going to get in November, that's one of the things he bought. But he bought continuation of this 3 or 4 times higher property taxes in Illinois, which is billions and billions and billions of dollars. And that's how it works. So, that's it. If it had gone differently, you could foresee a world where she gets this memo and decides to trust the people that brought her in here. She'd seen my work over the years. She maybe, instead of being such a coward, she decides, okay, well, I haven't seen anything about this guy that makes me nervous, so she could have gone. And the press release could have been this. The press release could have been Bill Whittle, who is a kind and gentle person, doesn't have a mean bone in his body, is being maliciously slandered in order to take him away from my campaign because they know he's a danger to them. And so he's been slandered by Media Matters, and he's slandered in the same way that Rush Limbaugh is slandered and Donald Trump is slandered and Glenn Beck is slandered and everybody's slandered. The way I've been slandered, the way I'm going to be slandered, and so on. So instead of me doing this and backing down to these low-life, miserable bastards, we're going to make it a campaign issue. This is how the left destroys people, by telling lies about them to get them to shut up. And Jeanne Ives, I'm not going to shut up. I'm immune to this. I don't care what they call me. If she had actual courage, that's what she would have done, something like that. But she didn't. She ran, and that's that. And the little follow-up to this story is simply this. About a month after this incident, the Ives campaign ran an ad, which I hadn't heard about until much, much later. I certainly wouldn't have done this, but nevertheless, about a month after this, the Ives campaign ran an ad where they had like a Muslim thanking Governor Rautner for this, and an illegal alien dressed like a Mexican, I guess, thanking Governor Rautner for making it a sanctuary state. And immediately upon the release of this ad, the left pounced all over it and said how unbelievably racist it was. But the kind of ironic boomerang here is, so did the Republicans. The Republicans in the state of Illinois came down and said, this is a horribly racist thing. We have nothing to do with it, completely distance ourselves from it. And I remember hearing this story after the election was over, I think, but if not shortly before. And I remember thinking, how does this feel, Jeanne? You know, how do you like it? You know, you're there trying to save poor people because the government is stealing all of this money, and Chicago's the murder capital of the world. And you think you're going in there to try and do something about it. And imagine my surprise when you find out that the left is fighting dirty with you. And now you've been smeared as a racist, not only by the left, but you've also been smeared as a racist by the people who are on your own team. How does that feel? Do you like it? Because I didn't like it very much at all. So that's where George Soros's money goes. And we have not yet seen the beginning of what this blue wave is going to do when it's coming. It's going to be overwhelming. And this is why they tried to shut us down on Facebook and all the rest. So, that's the world we live in, and we have to start making serious efforts to do something about it. I don't know what to say beyond that. They're shutting us up, they're shutting us down, and they are also controlling the information that that we could use to win this fight. So, you know, and this is the last thing I'll say on this particular subject. We'll take a few questions. I can't be here too late. I've got a couple of right-angle thumbnails I need to do before I go home, and I'm leaving again tomorrow. But basically, there's one more thing I want to say about this. I spent a lot of time, obviously, this last year working on these video game things and these computer graphic things. And I know a lot of people have thought that was a misuse of my time. And as it turns out, it probably was a misuse of my time. But let me just tell you why I wanted to do those things and why I'm going to continue to do them, but I'm going to do them in my spare time instead of my prime time. This is our country now. It's not our country someday. This is what our country is now. Most of the people that support the work I do want me to continue to make videos for the red square. And I think I need to be making videos for the blue ocean. But I can't convince people of this, at least not so far. So I'm going to continue to make videos that conservatives want to see, but basically I'm going to be continuing to make videos for a shrinking red dot. As the country gets older, that red square gets smaller, and pretty soon it'll be an all blue country. And I'll continue to make these videos for this red square. But that's not where we need to be. You know? It's not where we need to be.